Recording.
Great. All right. So this is the Finance Committee meeting. I'm Andrew Basil for the purposes of the recording. In present are Tamara Twardowski, Monica Hamill, Frank Seminaro, Mark Boyer, Kim Seldamridge, Dr. Otto, and we have a full group of people in the audience tonight. All right. I think what we're going to do is we're going to start on some of these smaller issues first, Mark, on the agenda, just to get them out of the way. So, I guess under other business, is the amortization schedule up on the website yet?
Not in the format that you had requested.
Okay.
I have not had time to
put
that in there, rearrange it, but I hope to have that done soon.
Okay. In terms of the health consortium, I got the document they had sent out to me. I don't know, does anybody else here on the Finance Committee want to see that? It's the governing documents. Could you forward that to all the other? And then could you try to get me a list of the trustees? So we know, like, people's names and who they represent. They should have a list somewhere, right?
I can easily get that.
Okay. And then whatever other documents they may have. I don't know if they've got some audits or claims histories or things of that nature that we can start taking a look at.
A whole binder that previous business manager kept with notes that she had.
Okay.
So I can finally let you take a look at that. I'll search through it first to see if there's anything in there that is pertinent other than just meeting notes.
Yeah.
See what I can find.
I'm just trying to get my feet wet and understand what's going on there. So, food service management company update.
I once again tried to make contact with the gentleman that I speak to about moving the high school from the National School Lunch Program. I have not had any response back from him yet.
Where is he?
I think he works for the state on the Department of Agricultural side. So as soon as I can get a response from him, I'll update the committee and we can start taking action whether or not we want to do whatever his recommendation is. I mean, if it's basically a response where you'd have to open up your contract again with your food service company, then it'd probably we'd have to weigh our decision if we're going to take the time to do that.
Wasn't our contract, doesn't it end at the end of this year anyways?
I believe it actually ends next year.
Does it?
It's a 2-year agreement.
Okay. Are you going to give a deadline for getting in touch with him before we take some sort of other action?
What I'm going to do is
maybe
probably tomorrow when I contact Kim Hayes, she's a district manager for STEC, so I can see if she can contact him, if she would have any more pull than I have.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't get a response, I'll contact the Department of Education again and see where I can get.
Better call Mahoney.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And make him see if he can't make a call for us.
Okay.
Or Judy Schwank or somebody else.
Okay.
Because obviously we really can't do anything on that until you speak to him.
Yeah, I need that answer before we can make that call.
Okay. In terms of the swap, you and I just sort of exchanged some emails before this. I think if you're putting it up on the website on a monthly basis, that's fine.
Okay.
You know, whenever you're posting anything else up there.
I think just for purposes of tracking it, I'll probably request the information bi-monthly just to see where it's at. A month is
a long time.
Yeah. So I just contact one person, I get the information, basically a day turnaround. So by tracking it bi-monthly, I'll post it monthly after the Finance Committee, but I'll track it bi-monthly and then update the committee if we reach the 1.5 million mark, and then we can make a decision then. Okay. The current swap value as of 11/8 was 2.2 million. So actually, it's 2.28 the last time we spoke, and went up to 2.29.
All right. Well, it's not going in the right direction, that's for sure. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions for Mark on anything? No. Other than what we're going to get into? Okay. All right, guys. Well, why don't we start with the information you gave us on this 5-year budget.
Turn that over to Kim and Mark for that.
Yeah.
All All right. We'll go over the first page in your packet, which would be the hypothetical general fund budget.
You're looking at the 5-year forecast.
Do you want to do the 5-year forecast first?
You want to have Kim do that 5-year forecast presentation first, or?
I had a lot of questions on that.
It's up to you.
In terms of the assumptions and things like that that were in there. So, I don't know. What do you guys want to go with
I
first?
think we just go with the budget first.
Okay, I'm in agreement with that. Why don't we just start with the budget?
Okay, well then let me set the stage. Per the board's direction from an earlier finance committee and consistent with last year, you charged the administration with coming back with a balanced budget model, which would, again, at this point, obviously is a hypothetical balancing of that. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation that has to go forward. Mr. Boyer was instrumental in that. Mr. Seldenbridge helped us a lot in this process. Obviously, in Danielle's absence, I obviously helped coordinate a lot of this with some of the things that we did. Just to let the committee know, one of the things that we did, and Mark will get to it when he starts talking about the figures on the paper, we spent a lot of time in adding a new, not a new wrinkle, but a different wrinkle to our process, in that we sat down with every department head, that being special ed, facilities, technology, anybody that has district-wide responsibility, and we extracted more, looked for potential double budgeting, maybe something in a wrong account, maybe people having contingencies that we were not aware of before, and then we also did that with every building principal. And surprisingly, that netted us quite a bit of reduction, and frankly, it might have been contributing to some of the surplus that we had been having every year, in addition to the surplus that we would generate with freezing the budget every year. I'll wait till Mark gets to that on the budget discussion from the figures that we have put together for you, but I'd really like to thank Mark and Kim publicly and the department heads and everybody. That seems very easy as we sit here and talk about it in the next hour, to put all these numbers on a piece of paper. It, frankly, is a gargantuan task and takes a lot of time. So obviously it's going to result in a lot of time of conversation, which is very important as the board and the next board that will sit here, goes through this process again. So this is where we were last year at this time. Just as a little bit of foreshadowing, it's not going to look much different than last year in terms of some things that you'll see through the next 25 minutes or so. So Mark and Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you start adding on what you want and walking through the process.
Okay. The first page in your packet, if you have it on your computer, it would be the balanced budget document, or it's called the hypothetical general fund budget. If you look at the top, what I'll do is I'll walk through the left side, which is the revenue assumptions, and then I'll walk through the right side, which is the expenditure assumptions. So we started off this discussion way back in September with a revenue assumption of $51.8 million. I'll just briefly go over the top. We started off expenditure assumptions with $55.6 million, which caused us to have a $3.6 million budget gap. If you walk down the left-hand side of the revenue assumption, you'll see that we have the revenue broken out by local at 33.5, the state broken out at 17.5.
That's million, just for the clarification.
Million. Federal at $940,000 to make up that $51.8 million. Our fund balance, current fund balance, is $4.49 million. So of that, it's broken down into four categories: non-spendable, which is $195,000; restricted, which is $220,000; assigned to the 13-14 budget for passing the budget last year of $2.2 million, and unassigned at $1.8 million. Potential revenue adjustments that we have collaborated on. To balance the budget, we put a tax increase
Now, at this point, you're getting into the hypotheticals.
This is hypothetical.
Prior to this, these are all actual numbers.
Well, it was all hypothetical to begin with, because we came up with where we're going to start this process. So we start off at $3.6 million gap.
Right, but the numbers you just gave us
To your question,
are actual numbers.
the state numbers are a projection. The local numbers are predicate. You might want to talk about how we arrived at those numbers because
When Denny Youngkin was here, we basically came up with where we would be at start 14-15. So those numbers there were hypotheticals based upon averages of prior year.
Got it. I guess I was asking more about the fund balance itself.
Those are real numbers.
Those fund
numbers
balance
are
are
actual.
real numbers.
Right.
Well, yes, the sign of 2.2 is real because that's what we basically passed the budget last year. That's what we designated for our budget. So yes, the fund balance numbers are real numbers.
Got it.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the revenue numbers under local, my recollection is when we were reviewing last year's budget, one of the things that was different was our collection rate was a little bit higher, and our assessed values were a little bit lower. So, how did you assume a higher collection rate and an even lower assessed value, or you leave the assessed values at the same
We assumed the same collection rate we did
as last year?
as last year.
Okay.
We assumed a 0.2% increase in assessed value, just as an general assumption. That 0.2%, I believe, came down to netting to $54,000 more dollars in tax revenue. So 0.2 is kind of insignificant. It's basically flatlining it.
Mm-hmm. And the state revenue?
The state revenue is basically a 1% increase in our basic ed and special ed from the previous year.
So that's 175,000.
Yeah.
Didn't we get 225,000 more than we anticipated last year?
That was, I believe, because of transportation subsidy.
What was the increase last year above what we had anticipated without the transportation subsidy? Do you remember?
I believe it was 1%.
Was it 1%?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, it was a slight. I think something about 150,000 rings in my head. I can't remember exactly.
Okay, so got it. All right.
Okay. So under potential revenue adjustments, remember this is all hypothetically speaking right now. The tax increase, we took it to the index of 2.8%, which is 0.81 mils. That would bring in $782,000 more dollars. We would have an increase in our rental reimbursement due to the River Rock Academy at APC. That would bring in $37,615. We would have to reduce our Social Security and retirement reimbursement from the state due to potential staffing reductions, which I'll talk about on the expenditure side. And that would be a reduction of $23,000 in Social Security reimbursement and $163,000 in retirement reimbursement. Based upon, once again, on the right-hand side of expenditure adjustments, reduction of activity and the physical fee, that revenue brought in was $139,000 we'd be removing. Reduction of gate revenue fees would be $55,000. And then we are projecting to use some of our unassigned fund balance at $299,000. That would bring us down to a total proposed revenue and fund balance of $52,737,000.
At this point, that's a little bit different from last year's process. We didn't put in any tax exception. And Kim, maybe you want to talk about this because you're the one that computed it. We're frankly not eligible for both of the exceptions this year anyway. Kim, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
We're not eligible for special education exception because they calculate it based on the increase in special education costs from 11-12 to 12-13. There wasn't enough to justify an exception. There is justification for exception for retirement, and probably will be for the next few years because of the increase in the pension. And I believe that amount about $365,000. $326,000, which would equate to about 1.15 mils.
But what I want to clarify for the committee is that last year at this juncture, we had already put both exceptions into the balanced budget model.
Right.
This year, neither one of them is there in our assumptions. That's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, that amounted to about $600,000. So that's out. That's not counted on the revenue side anymore at all in this model. It can certainly be based on board decisions at some point down the road put in there. That's the board's discretion and decision to do that. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear as this conversation goes forward.
Okay. I don't mean to jump ahead, and if I am, you can stop me, but where did you come up with the number for what to use for unassigned fund balance?
Yeah, assign that number.
Yeah.
It was just basically what was left to balance the budget.
Okay.
To basically.
After we did everything else, we
Yeah.
plugged in that number for fund balance.
That's what was
to
left
get it
after
to
the
zero.
expenditure cuts.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's out of the 1.8 unassigned.
correct.
And is it too early for me to ask the question, how low can we bring that and you still be comfortable to pay our bills?
Good question. Probably about 5% of the budget.
5% of the budget?
Yeah, which that would be.
You don't have 5%
Yeah,
there.
you don't have 5%.
You got less than 5% there.
Yeah.
That'd be $2 million.
Yeah.
So we're under 5% as it is.
So it's a red flag.
Okay.
Right. Well, assuming we would use all of the assigned fund balance for 13-14.
Right.
I did send
Which has
out-
not happened yet.
I did send
in
out
any
a
year.
projection of fund balance used, and we're basically projecting to use 1.8 million in 13-14 as expenditures look right now.
1.8.
1.8.
All right.
Fund balance.
So you've got, you'll have about 400,000.
460,000 to add to that, so we'll be over the 2 million.
Okay. Thanks.
Let me ask you, because we made that, we made our bond payment early this past year, right? I mean, it went in fiscal 12-13,
Yes.
correct? If we did that again this year, theoretically, we don't have a cash flow issue, correct? Instead of needing whatever it was, $1.5 million to cover as working capital, you wouldn't theoretically need that because we've made that bond payment now in
Right, we
13-14.
would have to make that bond payment. We could go back to, we would be due on July 1st of 2014. So we would be, have $700 some odd $1,000.
An additional working capital.
Yeah, and this would change this because debt services, as if we were making all of our debt service payments on time,
Mhm.
according to the debt schedule.
Mhm.
So if we would eliminate's the wrong word to use there, if we would go back to the prior schedule of how we were
Okay,
paying
so
it.
this reflects basically when the debt payments are due, not when we actually made the payment.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that 700 could be in play.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Any other questions on the revenue assumptions or fund balance?
Nope.
We'll go on the right-hand side, we'll go to the top of the sheet, to the $55.6 million of expenditure assumptions. You can see that how it's broken down, salaries at $25.5 million, benefits at $12.1, professional services at $1.3. There's other services there. It's $655,000 and $6.4 million. Supplies at 1.9. Equipment's at $370,000. Then dues and interest and the principal are $7 million. So if we go down to the potential expenditure adjustments, when we went through our department review with all the department heads and principals, we cut out essentially $366,000 from their budgets.
Would you give an example of some of the things that we found and as part of that reduction? I want to make clear that $366,000 did not involve one person. That was all just, I hate to use this word, but stuff that was in the budget that we removed. At our administrative discretion, we just took it out because it either represented something that was being over budgeted. Some people were setting up contingencies. And
I am curious about those examples because over the past couple of years, we went through this with a fine-tooth comb.
Well, that's why I want him to.
I'm surprised that there's still stuff happening that you found out there. So I would like to hear some examples.
Sure, there was some books and subscriptions in some of the elementary schools that were just, when you looked at what was being spent versus what was being budgeted, it was not in line. So we scaled it back to what was basically being spent historically. And then, of course, we had the principal there. We discussed everything. And so some lines actually did increase a little bit because they were historically under budgeting. So we were coming up with having the budget transfers and all of that. So to align the budget more with what was actually being spent, that's why we walked through every single line item, essentially. So it was like books and subscriptions and buildings and grounds. There was a little bit of excess in some of the utilities. Historically, they've been lower due to contracts and due to just better pricing that Mr. Smith has received. There was some excess built in there that we were able to eliminate off of that. I can actually give you more detail if you would like. I can give you...
Some of it came from special education, I know that.
Special education and the buildings and grounds were our biggest contributors, essentially. By going through there and sitting down and talking with the department head of what they actually needed and looking at the historical averages, we were able to come up with some more savings.
So when I'm looking at the spreadsheet that we had back in September, and we were looking under general supplies and books and periodicals, I think was another big line item. And then I guess I'm looking at contracted carriers.
Yeah, that's transportation.
Transportation. Was that also, that had to do with special education, though? Wasn't that with the placements?
The special education portion of
transportation.
We were able to also...
And that's what's being represented here,
and
for the most part?
The 366, yes.
Is the surpluses that we were looking here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The reduction in placements due to, once again, having the River Rock Academy at APC is $70,000. The reduction in transportation due to River Rock Academy was $65,000. Reduction in facility rent due to the district office move to wherever the board decides. That's $86,000. The next line is the potential elimination.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, that can't just be anywhere we want to move it because we do know there was a cost to move it to the high school of...
This assumption is basically if we move it to...
APC.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be essentially zero. Just move costs. We could probably find that within the guidelines of the budget. So the 86 would probably almost be true savings.
By moving it to APC?
Yeah. If we would move it to the high school, yes, there would be some cost too.
Well, we had some significant costs.
It almost negates that.
Is that not correct? Well,
We were close to 100,000.
okay. All right. So I just want to make sure we understood what the assumption was there.
Sure. The next line is we did meet with our contracted transportation carriers, and we are scheduled to meet with them again next week to go over what they've come back with. But for purposes of presenting this budget, we came up with the elimination of 3 buses, which is $105,000. The potential staffing and program adjustments. That I gave you a separate sheet on of $2.5 million. We actually decided to increase our contingency fund by $50,000. So the total contingency fund that we would hold is $100,000. And due to staffing cuts we had an increase in unemployment cost of $337,000. So the total expenditure adjustments that we just went over equals $2.89 million, which would bring our total proposed expenditures down to $52.7 million, which would balance our budget. We'd like to go over the detail sheet.
Yeah, we can go to the detail sheet.
2.5?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Okay.
When we sat down, I want to again state it for the purpose of the committee and the public that the list of information that you're about to hear represents, again, some drastic ideas. However, we're facing another drastic budget situation, and I'm going to say it and make sure everyone understands it. These are not coming out in the form of administrative recommendations. They are options that the board has to consider in balancing its budget. I'm going to say that again. These are not recommendations. They are options for the board to balance the budget. So now, having said that, here they are. Due to the decrease in enrollment, there were some things last year that we put on. We have a professional staff total elimination of 17 full-time equivalents, which adds up to about $1.5 million. Those would include, again, elimination of what's left of the kindergarten, the half-day program, the elimination of the basic skills, the elimination of 4 middle school positions, English, math, science, and social studies, which is technically a team, 1 elementary position due to decrease in enrollment, as our enrollment does continue to go backwards, and the elimination of elementary band. Again, all things that were on the table last year. And you all know the history of what happened with those, so I don't feel like I need to go into that. We're aware of, at this point, 1 potential professional staff retirement replacement, so unless that person changes their mind, that's the only number so far that I'm comfortable with. Based on the closing...
That's $70,000.
That's, excuse me, yes, $70,000 would be the net there. The potential exists due to the closure of this building. The part-time custodial service that we have for that could be eliminated and consolidated by the custodial service that would be in the district at the time. So we would basically need someone in that position. Additionally, there is about $700,000 of that $2.5 million earmarked for the complete elimination of athletics and extracurriculars, which would be all of the same things we talked about last year. There would basically be no sports or athletic or extracurricular program in the district. It would include the furlough of the athletic secretary, the athletic facilitator, and the athletic trainer. That comes out to about $700,000. That's inclusive of the net that you have there of revenue lost by the activity fee. So that's why when Mr. Boyer was explaining the $140,000, you can't count that if you don't have a sports program. Mm-hmm. This is the same. It's the same conversation we had at this point last year in concept. There's $91,000 in there that would result in the savings in the resignation and departure of Mrs. Long. We have taken our former special education coach, and this is not news. This has already been approved. But the net in our budget next year for that nets us $95,000 additional dollars, minus some other ancillary costs that take that total down to about $92,000. If we were to eliminate, if the board were to eliminate kindergarten, that would also result in elimination of a midday bus run for kindergarten, and there's also a daycare bus run that we do as a courtesy now to families in the district, which costs us about $30,000 a year. That total of transportation would be a total of $169,000 if you round it up. $2.6 million of very unfortunate options, but nevertheless, they're there for your review.
Dr. Arnold, those bus runs you just mentioned, are they in addition to the 3 proposed elimination of the...
Yes, we currently do a midday bus run. Some school districts don't do that, so that would be at the discretion of the board if you wouldn't want to do a midday kindergarten bus run because of the half-day kindergarten.
Okay.
And then the other one is, we also do kind of a courtesy daycare bus run during the day that takes students all over the district to get them to daycares. And it's great to have it. And it's something that the district, we, even in last year, were able to hold on to. But again, I'm giving you $2.5 million worth of options. What you choose to do, again, becomes the next 5 months discussion.
2.6 actually, close to
2.6 million of potential cuts. And again, what you decide to recommend is ultimately going to be up to you and the new board that sits here as you go through. But
So to offset that number, let me see if I got it straight. We potentially could have another $400,000 if we stay on track with how we're spending our allocated fund balance?
I'll turn to them for that question.
Yes. Just running the numbers really quick this afternoon on doing projections of expenditures. Yes, we could have another $466,000 added to our fund balance, where we're projecting to use 2.2, we would only be using 1.9.
And if we postponed our debt payment to July 1st, we potentially could have.
That payment's got to happen.
It's gotta happen. It's gotta happen.
I guess what I was thinking about in terms of
you're pushing it down the road here, but
yeah, I think I was just thinking in terms of working capital. So if you're going to use more fund balance, you have to have the monies available. So either we got to do a tax anticipation revenue note. If you don't have the working capital to make your salary payments and your debt payment, I was just trying to think of, okay, well, is there a way to just push the payments around in a way that allows us to delay our accounts payable until our receivables come in, and then you don't have to do a tax anticipation revenue note. That's sort of what was going through my head.
Right.
It's only like 2 weeks that we're fudging it.
16 budget.
Yeah.
But I just, in terms of,
you're pushing it down to try to save another year.
just to review, in terms of maximums, the maximum tax at the board's discretion is about, what, Kim, 1.1 million approximately?
If you add the retirement exception.
If the board hypothetically were to approve a tax increase, 1.1 is where you have to stop. You can't go any higher.
782,000
is the index.
Is the index, and then another 326,000
Correct.
for an exception for the PCERS?
Correct.
Increase.
And that's it. We can't.
That's
you can't even access the special ed. Last year that was worth $266,000. I think that's gone. You can't even access it.
Right. Well, we've got the maximum tax increase in here.
No, we actually don't.
We have the maximum index.
Oh, the maximum index. I'm
we
sorry.
got the maximum.
We
index
chose not
here.
to put the exception in this formula.
I'm just trying to figure out
point.
what possible numbers that we have to work with. So we possibly have 326,000.
Correct.
And we possibly have 400,000 if the fund balance.
So we'll need to add those to the spreadsheet like we did last year, where we had we have all the options open.
This will be a work in progress until you get to the
total
end.
amounts of tax revenue, total number of cuts that we can use. I think the other thing that comes into play is if you start talking about the elimination of the kindergarten program, well, you certainly are losing. There's a significant number of students that you're not going to have. I don't know. I wonder at the way our enrollment's already declining and has been declining over the last couple of years. Does that open up the possibility for closing another building? And if you close another building, now you're talking about additional administrative staff that's gone, and maybe that allows you to bring additional dollars back in to support other types of program.
Well, now that you brought that topic up, I think, and this is not, I think it's separate from this conversation a little bit, at least for next year. But maybe, Kim, you want to help me with that. We talked about doing some numbers projections, at what point that would. I think it's if our projections are come to pass and they become a reality. I think you're probably 3 years out from looking at the potential of another elementary building conversation about closing it. We could be at 3,200 kids in about 3 years.
Yeah, part of it depends on your decision on kindergarten. You have 3 buildings, elementary buildings right now. You have Birdsboro with a capacity of 650. And Amity with a capacity of 750, those two are your largest. If you add those two together, it's 1,400 students, and that's basically every room being utilized to the max. It's kind of unrealistic to use the maximum number, because that means every classroom's full with, and to fill every classroom, it's just impossible. With 25 kids or the number that you're using for your class size, you're always going to have some classrooms that are 20, 22, or whatever. Your newest elementary school, New Monacacy Center, has a capacity of 450. With kindergarten, potentially you could eliminate the New Monacacy Center by the year 2018, when your elementary enrollment drops to about 1,300, a little over 1,300 students. If you take kindergarten out, it could be done a lot sooner. It probably could be done in a couple of years.
Like 16 or 15.
Probably 2016, 17. And again, you're right. Mark and I would have to sit down and calculate, well, what do you save by closing down a building? Obviously, you save an administrative position, a support staff position, all the support staff that run that facility. You should save energy costs. But what that exact number is, I think we would want to take some time to study that.
So for the immediate budget year that we're discussing, that's certainly not on our radar at this point.
I mean, I was just throwing it out there. I mean, if you're taking, the number of kids out of kindergarten, and then it just sort of dawned on me when I was looking at the projections you guys were giving here from our last meeting. Right now our enrollment's been dropping by, 150 students a year, and
when I'm
2 years out, you're down another 300 students, and then if kindergarten's not there, well, now you're looking at perhaps shuffling students between buildings and closing down another building.
You'd have to do a little redistricting.
Right. But, the savings from closing down APC was about $600,000. So that's a lot of money that goes back that you have available to support other programs. So just an idea.
I mean, I was comparing to last year at this time, and the elimination of kindergarten last year was $436,000 to eliminate it. And then this year now it's $607,000, $100,000. I mean, that seems like a huge increase from last year.
It could be due to the staff. Remember, we went through furloughs last year, so the lowest tenured individuals were furloughed last year. So now you're reaching on higher paying salaries because you eliminated the people that were had the lowest seniority. So now you're going after kind of a bigger salary group.
Did we
kind
have
of
another
push
section of kindergarten too?
Pardon?
I think
We added a class.
We added one back.
Yeah, added more
Well,
class.
it's just we have less students, but we're paying a lot more.
That's just based on
Just-
when we do a number, we give you a real number based on who we project would be the furloughed individual.
Yes.
So that would change. That would never be the same year to year.
As far as the tax increases, can you do the exception without doing the index? Like, can you, or do you have to?
No.
You have to have a tax increase on the index to do the exception. Do you have to do the full?
Well, actually, you don't.
No, you don't have to do the full index.
Okay.
You could,
You can pick anything
in
you
essence,
want.
what you're saying is you don't have, what you'd be doing is
Taking less than the index.
less than the index. If you just said, we
Right, but
just
it's
want
for
to
a
do the exception
specific
amount,
purpose.
you're into the index. So it's really sort of a matter of semantics. But the index comes first, and then the exception, but you don't have to take the entire.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm just looking at it that it's for a specific purpose. So in my mind, I'm looking at it like,
Right.
we're not necessarily raising taxes for everything. We're raising taxes for a
Well, yeah.
specific reason.
And so if you want to do that, you make your millage the same as the cost of the pension system.
I just look at the band, elementary band. Last year was $117,000. This year it's $187,000. I mean, that should have been the same employees. Did those employees actually get that much more money?
Once again, it goes upon,
Because it should have been just the two, because I don't think we replaced anyone in elementary band.
But there was a shuffle, so right.
There's
so
a shuffle around.
There's a whole
Yeah.
when
It's not the
some
same people.
employees are taken out. Everybody, you have the next highest paid employees that get shuffled around to fill those posts. So now you're taking the
It's
next
more senior
tranche.
people.
You're taking the next tranche. Those people, let's say it was people who were let go last year, were making $40,000 a year. The people this year that would get lower, making $60,000 a year. So you're going to see a
So it's going to be higher Social
So,
Security taxes.
and then next year's going to be
fees
worse then.
Yep. You guys had provided us with like another spreadsheet that had the expenditures and revenues broken down
yes.
by code. And I was wondering, could you guys insert another column in there? I called it sort of the do nothing or the status quo column, because what you put in here, according to the notes, recognizes the cuts that you are proposing or throwing out there as levers that we could exercise in terms of, let's say, salaries. The number in there, 14.5 or whatever, includes elimination of kindergarten basic skills. So in section 100 or 1100, I'm just wondering, what would that number be if those weren't in place?
Actually, it's there. It's just hidden. It's column M. So
Oh,
you just unhide it.
Okay, column M. I see column M. Oh, never mind. Let me just unhide all the columns. P. It's column P.
Okay.
All right, I see it.
Yeah. So it should be for 1,100, 100 salaries and 15.2.
Yeah, I see
Yep.
that now. Now, when you guys are doing your projections for the actual versus projected cost for this year in terms of our fund balance, what event horizons are sort of on the calendar that would really be the big, would increase that confidence interval as to what that number might be at the end of the year? Is there something coming up in February that we need to be aware of, or some other thing in
Well, you
April?
always have to watch the weather.
Yeah, clearly.
That, with the utilities, yes. Measuring the impact of our budget freeze
Mhm.
would be a big one. I mean, basically, it's tough to say right now what the impact of that is, because I'm not sure what's going to happen, what's going to falter, break, so on and so forth. The best part about projections is I can monitor this in December, January, February,
Sure.
and then start winding it down to make sure. This was just basically what I thought we were doing based upon how the actuals were lying right now. And, salaries is a big part of that. Of course, as you get finite with things, you can get a better projection. So I'll go back and I'll go through all the salaries again and just project out where we are.
Well, there's a step, right, in mid-year with adjustments.
I believe so, yes.
So that's a critical one.
Yeah. And I can go through and see what kind of impact any type of long-term sub that we have right now is going to show. Project out the our administrative move with our coordinators. That's going to have savings there. Potential savings of projecting out totally the savings of not filling the business manager position right away, then versus the consulting fees.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to do that, just because, quite frankly,
Probably a zero.
if we ended up hiring a business manager, it costs more money than what we had been paying the old one, that it will kind of net out.
Yeah, I would suggest that.
True, but I can also calculate that to see how much more we would be spending too.
Yeah.
So, there's
Potential for,
There's a lot
always
of-
potential for special ed movement in terms of placements or,
Yeah.
knock on wood, I think we've got a real tight grip on due process stuff, but you never know. So, special ed's always a wild card.
All right, so there's another $326,000 in potential taxes, another $400,000 potential dollars available in fund balance if things go well. We won't know that probably until, January, when the first step movement is sort of adjusted in terms of our salaries and benefits for the teachers. And then other event horizons that may come up. Is there anything in April or March or whatever that helps us pin down that number?
State subsidy.
State subsidy.
Yeah,
But we don't
well,
find out about that until
The governor presents his budget in February.
February, right.
Usually, you can pretty much rely that it's going to be pretty close to that. So, we're speculating an increase in basic education subsidy and special education subsidy. And I don't know what he's planning to do because of the continued increased costs of the pension system to the state as well.
Okay.
Well, the other option also is, throw all the options out on the table, is we've got 1.8 million in unassigned fund balance. We're projected to spend 300,000 of that. There's still 1.5 million.
Yeah, I think all the fund balance is available as an option.
So you got to remember that number's there, and we have to be really conscious of what you really think you need to dive into to make those payments more. But there's 1.5 there.
Well, tax anticipation revenue notes are there for a reason.
But doing a tax anticipation revenue note, that's a slippery slope.
That's for 3 weeks.
This is all slippery.
Well, yeah, for 3
Everything
weeks,
works.
but then you have to also recover what you're spending as interest also.
Right.
So
Yeah, but 3 weeks on
I'm just
400,000
I
or
mean,
whatever the payment is, $800,000
Doing
at
it-
3%. I mean,
I've been researching. I know the district already had done one. That would not be one thing I recommend. If we don't have to do it, like if we're projecting that we're going to run out of fund balance, that's our only option to meet payroll. Well, yeah, we're going to have to do it. But
Yeah, I would not recommend using all your fund balance. You always want to leave at least 5% if you look at any type of rating service.
we're already
Standard
below
Poor's.
5%.
Well, I know, but you need to shoot back up towards that would be my recommendation. Right now, we're anticipating conservatively that you're going to use 1.8 of your fund balance this year in 2013-14. It's a one-time revenue source. So you want to gradually get out of that because you're going to have to make it up sometime, and when you do, it's going to be an immense amount of money that you're going to have to make up. And most school districts that get to that point where they have to use tax anticipation notes, it's very difficult to climb out of that. Very difficult.
I
You never
understand.
want to get that close.
I understand that it's a recommendation to be healthy, I guess, financially with your fund balance to maintain 5%. But this isn't a healthy situation. This is, a try to save everything you can situation. So the question is, I realize that there's a rule of thumb out there to keep it at 5%, but what's the real number that you think you need to dip into that, and the rest is up for grabs for us to try to keep some of this stuff. That's the number I guess I've been grappling with for 4 years, is what's that real number? Not what people recommend it should be, not a percentage. What is the real number that needs to be there? And the rest,
Yeah.
we got to try to use.
I'll show you what happens. We have a long-range model that I used for 25 years. We can literally show you what happens if you try to spend all your fund balance. And what hurts you as a school district is you're always limited by Act 1. You can never make up a sudden loss in revenue or unexpected bumps down the road. Part of having a fund balance isn't just covering your cash, it's also anticipating things or not being things coming up that you haven't been able to anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens all the time. Either a sudden drop in revenue, either in state, federal, local. Again, you need everybody provides a cushion. I don't think anybody runs their household without some sort of savings account, because you never know when your employer may drop your salary because they're not doing well. The same thing can happen to a school district. The state drops its revenue. You lose an assessment appeal, a major assessment appeal. I strongly recommend that you keep something for those unexpected things that can happen to a school district. Once you get down there,
I think what Frank's asking is, you say something. What's the something? What's the red line? And that's what we're always. That's what we're wrestling with.
I'm saying, for someone who's been in the business for 32 years,
mm-hmm.
you don't want to. You want to shoot for 5%.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to shoot for.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, what if we got sued for something? I mean, would that come out of there?
Yeah,
we had
sure.
to pay?
That's the due process.
So you get
This is why I tried.
lawsuit for something.
Well,
See, I don't disagree with you, but at the same token, the what ifs is why we've seen tax hikes in the past. Oh, what if we need this? What if we need that? And the taxes got raised, and then we drew a surplus. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about just the past couple of years. I'm talking about
Right.
historically,
Right.
because it's always these what if situations, and it didn't get us anywhere. It didn't help us. I mean, they raised the taxes. We're still sitting here with the deficit.
Right.
In 2014 here for this next budget. So, we can't be sitting on all this money in fear of what ifs and eliminating, too many of these programs.
You have had deficits in the past. From what I looked at, there were years where you deficit spent, and again, it may have been I wasn't here. I don't know what caused them, but there were deficit spendings in prior years. It wasn't all surpluses. I think surplus this year is $146,000, which is peanuts.
Yeah, but that was yes, it was peanuts, but we were projected to spend $1.3 million out of our fund balance, so it was a $1.4 million swing.
And I think what we did, what Dr. Otto talked about, was part of it was there were too many contingency funds, and a lot of those we went through line item by line item and eliminated them and created one contingency fund. Mark talked about.
Where is that on here?
Increasing. Well,
it would be in the. Are you in the detail?
Yeah.
Okay, it's at the bottom. Not the bottom of the bottom, but.
It's in the 5,000s. Is it in the 3,000s?
What's the spreadsheet that you sent us?
This one.
You go to 5,900.
Yeah.
Other finance.
I see it.
services.
Okay.
You see, it was 50,000.
Yeah.
I moved it up to 100, which might also be a little too low.
Mm-hmm.
But we did take some of what we cut out, plus a little bit. We put into there just in the fact that we get a student in that has that we didn't anticipate their special needs,
Mm-hmm.
or we need minor roof repairs.
Mm-hmm.
That it would come out of there.
I would guess in order to answer Frank's question, and I'm not saying I would recommend going down that, but I would think you could run a report of what your expenses were in July and August for the last 5 years to get an idea of what correct. I mean, and that would show you what your if you took an average, you could figure out what cash flow you needed.
So let's say we get down to the magic number, but once we use it, it's a one-time
right.
use.
No, I understand.
So,
I'm
yeah.
just thinking that would answer his question. I
It
mean,
would
if that's
answer
his
the
question, it would answer his
You-
question.
You free up all
Right?
that money.
I don't think it does, no, because we've gone through this. I'm trying to think why it doesn't.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, we sat down with the business manager, and I think I said the same thing. Just tell me what you're spending in July and August, and that's...
I probably have that somewhere in here.
Okay.
your fund balance, but it's not.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think why it's not.
I thought there's some form.
There's something, yeah.
Well, most of your, if you look at your cash flow, most of your cash does come in July and August because you have the discount period. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, we get like $20 million
Yeah, so it's not an
the
issue.
third weekend of
Right.
August.
It's not an issue of cash flow or going out on a tax anticipation note, or what the issue is that unexpected, a special ed student moves in that costs $100,000 that you weren't expecting. Those things are, once you use up all your fund balance, you have no room to pay for those unexpected costs. And once you get down that far, it's very difficult to climb back out. And anytime you try, to get a rating from an outside agency, your rating's going to be very poor. That's not the main reason. The main reason is you have a fiduciary responsibility to keep the school district financially healthy.
Mhm.
And I don't know of anyone who runs their budget without some sort of savings account to be there for those unexpected costs.
I hear you, but we've got an educational responsibility too. I mean,
And I know what you're saying.
No,
I
I'm
know what you're
saying-
saying. It's money. It's tempting to be there. But I can we can show you what happens when you try to.
yeah, I hear you. I mean, I was on the other side of that, preaching that 3 years ago. But
Yeah.
this is, these
Yeah.
are deep, these are pretty deep,
Yeah.
All right, no, I mean, we've got things to work on again.
Mm-hmm.
And I also say about the 3 buses too. That's just a guess. I mean, we met. With,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
We met with the 2 contractors.
We don't have a commitment from them that'll work yet. We're guessing based on the drop in enrollment.
Okay,
Looking
so you
at
didn't
filling.
identify 3 specific routes?
No,
or anything like that?
We looked at all the buses. Saw the
Tim looked at all that.
Looked at the capacities and said, you can fill some of these buses up. Now, it will probably make some of the routes a little bit longer, but when you're looking at longer bus routes versus educational programs,
Or no bus routes at all.
or no bus routes at all, what are you going to pick? So we may get 6 routes, or we may only get 3. I think we can push them. I mean, the reason I pushed to put it in there is because I think we can push them to get at least 3.
Yeah. Oh, that's a start, yeah.
Or if these buses aren't so full, maybe getting smaller buses. Didn't they charge us a different rate for the smaller bus? It was like $30-something thousand
Yeah, we
for
can-
the full
I'm
bus,
sure
and then it
there's
was
a different rate. We can take a look at that.
Well, that conversation's not over.
Yeah.
But this is a starting point.
Okay, so now I'm at the bottom of that spreadsheet of projected expenditures, and I'm looking at the differences between columns O and P. So basically 13-14 versus a proposed budget for 14-15 if we're not doing anything, we're not making any cuts or anything like that. And it looks to me like the largest drivers here obviously are salaries and benefits. It's $3.2 million out of $3.6 million deficit.
I mean, yes. One option that we didn't present here was we could go for a district-wide salary freeze from top to bottom. Keep at the same level it is now. That would probably, I think it was what,
Well, just I think we calculated $1.1 million.
just in salary.
Right,
Does
just
not
in
include
salary. It doesn't include
reduction
anything
in
else.
FICA or the retirement.
Well, when you add in the benefits are moving to $2.1 million.
Yeah. And you have to figure 46% of your entire budget is salaries. 8% is health care, 10% is retirement, 4% is Social Security. So it's almost 3/4 of your budget.
Yeah, it's like 70, 72, 73% of our budget.
Right. Your debt service is at 13%. Can't change that. There's very little that you can look at. Energy,
Well, we've been down the path of all the other things over the last 3 years. So.
I'm just looking for some other red flags here. I'm just trying to scan through it, but.
So total other purchases, services, 500. That went down $641,000. That's what we were talking about in terms of the general supplies and all those other types of things, right?
Yeah, and just again to repeat, what we were looking at, anything that, we were looking at accounts that had $1,000 in and saying, well, for the last 3 years you budgeted $1,000, you didn't spend anything. We took it. It's in that number. We said, well, if you don't have it, we're not putting placeholders in if you're not going to use it. So we took them out. Some were a lot bigger, obviously, but we were down to that level. And sometimes we looked at some that, like Mark said, that they said, well, you know what, I have X, Y, and Z needs, so we said, well, maybe we better put 500 in there.
We sort of made a major shift in philosophy in that, if you're a building administrator, obviously you're going to plan for, well, what if my copier breaks down? I better put something in for that. That's being fiscally prudent. The problem is each building administrator was doing exactly the same thing. So you had several levels of contingencies, and what we did, Dr. Otto and Mr. Boyer and myself went through with each administrator and said, listen, we're going to take these contingencies out. We're going to have one contingency fund, so if something happens, it goes through sort of a central watchdog, and then it's taken care of in one contingency. And so you shouldn't have some of the excesses that you've had in prior years. That's a big philosophical change for people to make.
Right.
And they have to sort of trust that system's going to work.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, because that was a problem. How about special education specifically? That budget has always been, are there numbers built in specifically to the special education department's budget, take into consideration if somebody comes on, someone comes on that? Okay, so we're not. So
we zero, but
when you talk about that's money that's going to come out of the fund balance, truly it will now, because it's not being hidden, not hidden.
Based on, and you have to know that
somewhere in a special education budget.
If you remember 2 years ago, we created a placement sheet, and we said to the special ed department, identify the 25 bodies that leave this district and go somewhere because of their IEP needs. Not what you think you might have, not when we pass the budget, it's what we know on June 27th. At that day, the kids that are on a roster. That roster is always in fluctuation, but we've zero budgeted. We only go based on what we know. So we could benefit from that if someone were to either move out of the district or their situation improves and they're able to be educated back in-house. Or we could next year, when students might have some ongoing problems, we may have to wind up placing 2 more kids than we thought. Those aren't in the budget either. So it's a constant management process. If you remember a couple of years ago when I became, really in my second year when I came to the board with my special ed due process plan to try to cut down on those costs. Remember, the first 2 years I was here, we were losing $200,000-$300,000 a year. We've cut that down to like less than $30,000 a year now. So that all of that money would, hypothetically, you can't budget that. You don't put a line item in that says we're going to budget for due process. Some districts might. We never did. Right. So because of what we're doing internally, programmatically, we've, for the time being, severely reduced that loss. They could come back again. A parent could sue the district. But I think we're better prepared to deal with that.
Fund balance for that.
And you would use, exactly, to answer your question.
So what is in the contingency fund? What comes out of the contingency fund then? What is in there?
Right there. Right now it's just a placeholder of $100,000.
That's it.
Where do we think we would spend that money?
Past 2 years, or past year, we had $50,000 that we didn't spend. So that contributed to our excess. So right now, where we could spend it, it's in there in case placements go up. in case of an emergency with, that is non-capital replacement.
Why isn't the contingency fund sitting with unassigned fund balance then? If it's not, why is there this fund?
Well, PD has a rule that you're not supposed to go over your budget amount, so it's better to put it into an expenditure account that you can transfer out of the emergency reserve or contingency into the account that you need. Like, for example, if you have a placement, a special education placement that came in the middle of the year, you transfer out of the contingency fund into that account, so that way you're not overspending your budget, basically.
Okay. So
It's illegal. It's illegal.
It's,
Right.
it's
It's
money
illegal.
that's in your budget already.
Correct.
But it's not allocated.
Correct. It's not allocated. But it's there, or somebody calls and says.
So is it fair to me to say we've got another $100,000 somewhere?
No, actually it's not, because $100,000 is technically budgeted.
It's accounted for already.
Yeah.
But it's not getting spent.
Correct. Well,
So
No,
we
it
could
could be
spend the account down.
Yeah.
You'll spend some of it.
It's an unknown. Technically, it's an unknown. I mean, we could have a perfect year and not have any unforeseen circumstances occur. I wouldn't want to bet on that.
I'm going to count that.
You do what you want with
I'm
it.
going to count that.
You guys have any questions?
No, they answered the ones I had on here.
Okay.
Answered.
Frank,
So-
do you have anything else?
No, thank you very much. It's-
What we would like to know
I don't
going-
like the numbers, but I appreciate you guys doing
What
it.
would you like to do in terms of communicating? Obviously, these are pre-deliberational and subject to release based on what the board would like to do. At some point, you're going to have to show these publicly.
Well, I think what we need to do is get it to the rest of the board, and first, the rest of the board has to see these things. And then second, I think we need to change the format on some of these things here to include some of the numbers we already discussed as, other potential options, whether it's additional fund balance from, this year, or it's the tax exception, or it's, potential wage freeze discussion and stuff like that. So all those options are out there. We want the total universe of options available for board discussion and community discussion. So I think that all needs to be listed on the spreadsheet. I think, the one spreadsheet that we were using in years past sort of had a format that allowed for, these different boxes. So up on the top right-hand corner, we had all the taxes and the fund balance issues, and then we had expenditures on the bottom left and, revenues on the top, so on and so forth. So I'm not sure which format is the easiest one for everybody to understand.
No, we already have this one developed.
This one works,
Yeah.
but I think with this one here, it just, you have to get more. Anytime you change one of these things, the quote-unquote gap at the bottom changes, whereas the other one you can list.
it's actually self-balancing.
Right.
I create where it's self-balancing.
So you're just
Fund
pulling
balance.
from
Yeah.
pulling from the fund balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Just that's what we did last year. The fund balance becomes so we don't ever move off of the zero. The fund balance becomes the
it's the
sort
plug.
of the water level.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You guys don't have any other questions? I'll open up to the floor.
No, I think
Did you want to hold off on this?
it's good work that you guys.
Yeah, let's just field some questions while
Okay.
that stuff is fresh in people's minds. Does anybody have any questions they want to bring up to the board? Okay. Did you want to talk about your 5-year projections then?
Sure. I probably ought to
Project.
put it up on
Sure,
the
yeah.
screen to say.
Be a little hard to follow along on the spreadsheet. I was looking at the thing that you sent, and there was a lot of it when I unhit all the columns, and there was just a ton of information in there, and so I wasn't sure where you were going with some of the things that you were doing there.
Well, you did change some assumptions, and I apologize. I was in a
That's all right.
trial.
No, that's fine. Was that was a spreadsheet project A or whatever it was? Okay. Yeah, you can.
All right, let me.
taken off.
I think I will.
Basically, these numbers reconcile with the assumptions that Mr. Boyer put together for you. You can see that in 2013-14, this is basically by major object code. So this identifies over here your salaries, health care, retirement. The reason retirement is highlighted is because that is something that is beyond your control. It's dictated by the state. And if you look in the cell, you can actually see, well, we take the salary, and for 2013, the state said we're paying 16.93% of salary. Next year, that jumps up to 21.31%. The following year, it's 25.8%. The next year, it goes up to 28%. And if you keep going out here, eventually it gets up to 30% of payroll. There is some legislation in place that may level that off at 25%. But again, until legislation gets passed and through the House, you really can't use that as a projection. But the long-range plan, financial plan is set up so you have things basically by object code. Here's your debt service. This is the plan that was presented tonight at $52,737,000. It's actually almost level to what we expect to spend in 2013-14. We're assuming, as mentioned, no growth. Basically, in real estate, this 3% represents the tax increase plus some very minor growth in interims. If you look at wage tax, it's grown 1% the past year, so we're assuming 1% for 14-15. Delinquent taxes, that's something you hope doesn't go up. You want to, it's less. You have people that aren't able to pay their tax or are not paying their tax for some reason. Transfer taxes are up and down. Other local represents mostly your per capita tax and some utility taxes and some minor things. We're assuming 2% for basic instructional subsidy, 1% for special education. Again, that's the big unknown that we won't know until February. Transportation is based on a very complex formula. And you notice, somebody mentioned, I don't remember who it was, there was a big surplus in special education, state subsidy. That was because of transportation. And basically, this is a very complex formula. But part of the formula says that you will get anything above $500,000 of your market value. And the way STEB was calculating it is that every year they would use actual data, and then the following year they would use an assumption. And so on the off years, you'd have a big increase, and then the next year you'd have a very small increase or even a minor decrease. That affects your transportation subsidy. So your transportation subsidy fluctuates mainly because of that, and it'll go up significantly one year, and then next year there's hardly any increase. And that's what we have that's what we're expecting to happen in 2013-14. And then we have a 3% projected increase being somewhat conservative there. Social Security, of course, is tied to your salaries, so is the retirement. They've been covering basically 50% of your costs. Debt subsidy, that's pretty consistent, well known. And we're not expecting any increase in federal subsidy. So for this year, conservatively, we're looking at spending $1.8 million more than taking in. That's a revenue source. It's a one-time revenue source that you have to make up. And so that's part of the problem for 14-15 is you're trying to make some of that up. Well, right now we have it being done gradually. We're still going to use some of it, which takes you down to a fund balance of about 4.5%. And that is using the 2.8% allotted to you. What this model allows you to do is, play with the tax increases. Like, let's say you decide, well, we want to spend all our fund balance. We don't want to have a tax increase, and you put a zero in there and enter it. you can see by the year 2016-17, even with increases next year, using whatever the index is, and that's what another big unknown. You don't know whether your index is going to be 1.8 or 2.8, because again, that is determined by the state average weekly wage and the ECI. But with no tax increase this year, not changing anything else, basically you would run out of money by the year 2017-18, even with these tax increases, and that's one of the reasons why I caution you to not spend down your entire fund balance. It's just there's too many variables in public education finance, and it's not recommended by anyone. So this is the model allows you to do this. You can change tax increases in any 1 year.
Can I ask you a question? Is your pro forma here set up in a way that it seems to me what it's doing here is it's the variable that changes is the taxes. Can you set it up in a different way so that you enter your variables? Let's say you can say, well, we're going to do this for taxes over the next 3 years. You're going to plug those numbers in. It would change the other variables in your assumptions for revenues or expenditures up on the top end of your model?
Yes. In other words, well, if I'm understanding your question, your inputs
all seem to be up above, and your change variable is, I guess, the tax rate in the bottom.
Correct. Right.
Whereas you could reverse the model and say, well, look, this is what we're going to decide to do in terms of tax increases over the next 3 years. And then you plug the numbers in,
right.
And then you want to change the numbers up above. Well, that would mean that you would need, X number of dollars out of whatever it is.
Right.
You can't assume a growth rate of 2% a year in salaries. You have to assume a growth rate of 1.
Right.
Or
you would basically change these numbers in this column. Now, what I did was between last week and this week, or actually today, I was able to get up here a little early. What I did was I said, okay, obviously not obviously, but your enrollment is dropping. And I looked through your enrollment projections and looked for classes of where there was a drop of more than 20 students. And so in 15-16, there's a possibility that you may be able to eliminate 3 positions because of your enrollment. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I just subtracted $152,000 here, which is basically a teacher on step 4 bachelor's. We don't know exactly how much it's going to be because it depends on the furlough process and who falls out, that type of thing. But I thought it was a pretty good average. Here I put in 2 positions. 2 positions, and so you can either change it by doing a subtraction here, which is I did it that way because I wanted to be accurate, or you can do it by changing the number here. Okay. But with those assumptions, with some position furloughs in the coming years, I mean, you're looking at tax increases of probably average of 2 to 3%, maybe, and then down to below 2% for the following years, which keeps pretty much in line with inflation, but keeps your district healthy and keeps your fund balance right around 5%. So if you want me to plug anything in here,
I'm just thinking about how do you construct that into solver and put some constraints on that model that would drive different numbers depending on what your assumption is.
Mm-hmm. For example, here on I believe this line item is equipment. I know, for example, in the budget is replacement of, you have 7-year-old computers, and so those are being replaced. Next year, I don't anticipate you having to spend as much as on equipment, so there's actually a 20% drop. That's an assumption. If you wanted to change that and said, well, no, we think you're going to spend more on equipment, you just basically put a 0 in there, enter, and you have a new assumption.
But did that increase the tax? on
No,
the
it didn't change the tax.
It didn't?
No.
You can manipulate different variables
You
in the
can
chart.
manipulate, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You can manipulate the expenditures, or you can manipulate the tax.
Anybody have any questions?
No, it's great to see them all.
Thank you, Kim. That was
Okay.
the board's been looking for that for a long time.
Those
Anybody
numbers
have any
you have
questions
plugged
from
in
them?
there,
Sorry.
are they actuals?
Yes.
Are
Yeah,
they- you
the
got the
prior years
actual
are our
numbers
actuals. Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mark them in.
Sure.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am. Could you state your name and your address for the minutes? Yes.
Just to that specifically, I'm wondering about 15, 16 days ago, elimination of 3 positions, but does that take into account retirement? Or is that kind of one in the same? Would one wash out the other?
That's a good question. I mean, if you have 3 retirements, then you don't have to furlough three positions.
Okay,
And so the savings would be about the same.
okay.
Because even with retirement, you have retirement bonuses you have to pay. There's other costs to consider, such as unemployment and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, to her question, you can't factor retirements into that projection because you don't know about them.
Right. Right, but
It'd be nice to be able to make an assumption and say, hey, what if we did get 3 retirements? What would it look
Right.
like then? So,
Well, I think you can do that though with this, right?
yeah,
we
you
could
can
do
do
the
that
same
with,
thing.
right,
We
you
could
do the same thing,
Yeah.
just use it
Yeah.
as a furlough or something.
Right.
Yeah. And we actually did pull the years of seniority to see how many people would be eligible based upon years of service and age. So we do have that stuff, that information pulled already, that we can further look at, and also their PSER years, to see when they actually are eligible for retirement, if we so do choose to maybe push an early retirement if we wanted to do that.
Mhm. Right,
So we have that information all pulled and ready to go.
nice.
Good work, guys.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is good work. I mean,
good job.
the numbers are what they are, but the work is.
So, given that the new board will be seated in a couple weeks, last year what we did, I think we did a December PowerPoint to kind of present all this and then we posted it on the web. So, if that's the direction we want to go, we need to know so we can begin to put together a public PowerPoint
Well,
presentation.
I think what I'd like to do is get some feedback from the board at the
Okay.
voting meeting,
Okay.
and then, because I'm sure they're going to have questions too.
Mhm.
A couple of them aren't even here. And they may have some other ideas as well. I mean, I'd like to see if there's any other further tweaks or refinements we can do. But when the new board is seated, we'll find out when we can schedule another budget meeting and
Very
we
good.
can present it to the public and post it on the website. Okay?
Very good.
All right, if there's nothing else,
No.
Not from
Okay.
us.
anybody have any comments before we close the meeting?
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
One more, just something to consider, but we were talking, you gave some interesting numbers about enrollment dropping. And so again, I would have to ask that the number of $100,000 for administration to move into the high school being negated by the $86,000 savings. I'm not sure, what's not in that equation is what gains would you have from generating renting or selling APC?
I think that's an unknown quantity for 2 reasons. One, it's not clear to me. Remember, we could try to sell APC, I suppose, and see what kind of revenues are available. From what I've seen in the marketplace for commercial and industrial buildings, I'm not optimistic you're going to get very much for that building. Because it is a school building. It's not an office building. It's not set up for industrial commercial use. It's really set up for a specific type of use. And the conversations I've had with some brokers in the area that do a lot of business, CBRE and others, have told me that you're going to find either like a YMCA or some other nonprofit that would potentially use that facility. And so we have $9 million of debt sunk into that building that expires in 2034. I'd be surprised if you got a couple of $1 million out of the building if you sold it.
Actually, we sold, before I got here, the Monocacy Kindergarten Center
That was
sold.
like $350,000.
So just to give you an example, I think the district, $350,000 to sell the Monocacy building. I think Union Township bought it, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I guess my trouble is that, again, we have to consider maintenance, utilities, the fact that we're not getting tax revenue, and also a startling revelation of, you're projecting a possibility of in 15, 16, you might not even need Monocacy. So
No, we wouldn't be Monocacy.
okay, so we're
be
building
Birdsboro.
rich and we're going to become poor. I would just beg you to reconsider your assets and selling, liquidating, doing something.
It's always a
option.
consideration
It's always
to the
an
board.
option.
It's always an
Totally an
option.
option.
Okey-dokey.
The only issue we run into, which is unlikely based on these numbers, is if enrollment goes up. And we sold the building, and we're still paying the debt off, and then we got to buy another building.
Well,
But
you know
you don't see that in the numbers.
You don't see that in the number, and you also have to consider the cycle of our community.
Right,
I mean, how many are already through? So we have room for more to come in without those numbers actually going
Right.
up.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just,
I think just for everyone's benefit, that what Mrs. Slatter is referring to, I think we posted those numbers, correct?
Yes.
They're actually out there for the public. You can see them. I don't know if you looked at them or not. The actual projections that we put out there that Mr. Seldenridge did for us that are based on live births. So they're about 97%, if not even more accurate. That's where we're going to be, unless something drastic happens.
And don't get me
so
wrong,
it's going to decrease.
We're going to lose enrollment.
Right, okay.
but at the same time, we still have the word out in the street that, we have space available in APC to lease on the second floor. And so there may be a potential additional equity that can be developed there. By closing that building, moving River Rock in, and if we move the administrative building, the administrative offices over that building, we've basically developed a net improvement to our budget of over almost $1 million, which is not too shabby considering where we were just 12 months ago.
I guess what I'm seeing wrong with it, though, is that you're talking about a one-time $100,000 to make the changes necessary to the high school. Okay, yet you are going to negate, you're not going to have the $86,000 Matthew Brook annual fee.
That's correct.
So it's almost a wash, and that $100,000 is a one-time thing. So how much additional rent revenue could you generate by not being an APC?
Well, here's the beauty of it. We can move our administrative offices at any time to the high school, right? So if we move them to APC, and then somebody wants to lease the building or buy the building, we can move from APC to the high school.
But wouldn't it make more sense to just try to generate income without moving in there?
But I'm not sure. The assumption that you're making is that there's somebody knocking on the door right now saying, we want that building, and there isn't.
Market?
Hmm?
Is it on the market?
It's not listed on the MLS, no.
Should it be on the market?
We can do that. Absolutely, we can list it on the MLS. But as I said, I've talked to several realtors who specialize in this, and they said, you're better served putting the word out and talking to other school districts, other nonprofits, and things of that nature for this type of building. It's not in the best location. It doesn't have easy access.
Doesn't have an elevator.
It doesn't have an elevator to the second floor. There's lots of things that make that building a little problematic for just any business to use. So I look at it, there's a short-term and there's a long-term viewpoint on that. One, how do you maximize the utility, the economic utility of that building in the short term that helps us get through what we're going through right now, right? And I see that as, okay, you can get a River Rock in there, you can move your administrative offices over there, and you've saved the school district a lot of money. And at any time, within a 6-month notice, we can move River Rock out, and we can move our administrative building offices out of there to some other location, wherever that may be, and put somebody else into place that maybe generate more revenue for us. Or if somebody's that interested in the building and we want to sell it and the community's on board, you can sell the building. I don't know what the number will be, and I don't know how long that will take, especially in this real estate market. But those are all things for us to talk about over the next 6 to 12 months.
How much, is there any investment at all for you to move administration into that building?
No, it's ready for us.
Nothing, just move in.
Moving costs.
But we'll have those moving costs whether we go to there or somewhere else.
How much are they roughly? Do we have an idea?
You're talking about,
Maybe $5,000 if that.
yeah, we'd use most of our own staffing and,
Okay.
Yes, Mr.
Thank you.
Templin.
You are keeping a pulse on, what you said about your enrollment going up, but you are keeping a pulse on your borough, your townships, developments that are coming on.
Yeah, there's you have Union Green and Union Township. WB Homes is also looking at putting in a lot of townhomes and whatnot in Union Township. There's plans for Amity Township as well. Yeah, so we did look at the number of building permits that have been pulled over the last 5 years, the number of preliminary and approved plans that are out there that could be developed. Mr. Seldenbridge had indicated to us that for every new household, it's about 0.65 kids that would be added to the school district. So those considerations were sort of put into place. But look, who knows what the housing market's going to do 5 years from now? I have no idea. Could it explode? Could it still be in the malaise that it's in today? It's too difficult to project.
Actually,
yeah, we are considering it.
Mr. Templin, to your question, okay, maybe you want to take a little, since we have a good crowd here, and people are obviously looking at that document, why don't you explain, just in a summary fashion, how you got to those projections so people understand where those numbers are coming from, that they're not, they're real numbers.
The Department of Health puts out birth data for every township, and so I plugged in the actual birth data for Birdsboro, Union Township, and Amity Township, and we then look at history and say, okay, from birth to kindergarten, this is how many of those students, how many of those births get to the public school system. And then each grade, there's a survival ratio from K to 1, 1 to 2, 3 to 4. And we use those survival ratios and we use the averages that we think best represent the future. And there were building permits over the past few years. I think it was about 54 over the past 3 years, and even with the ones that you projected, the only time that a building project will rearrange your enrollment projections on it quickly is if you build 400 houses over 2 years. If you're building 100 houses, or if you have 100 say building permits, and you're going to do 10 a year, that's not going to affect your enrollment projections because that's based on on history. So we are taking a careful look at that. If a farm is sold off and all of a sudden looks like they're going to build quickly, then that would change it, but it wouldn't change it for a long period of time because first of all, it's going to take you someone 6 to 12 months just to get approvals. Design work, building houses, so you're talking 2 years down the road, and by the time they get to the system, it's not going to affect your immediate 5 years.
And that's actually in a very builder-friendly environment, I can assure you. 2 years is a...
Well, I just hate to see us give up something and then turn around and say, oh, guess what? Now we've got to go into our shitty town mode again like we had years ago, because I hated that, seeing these children in these sheds, basically. Well, the corporate class, I call the sheds.
Well, we think those numbers are pretty trustworthy.
Okay. No more comment. We'll bring this meeting to a close. We have one more in the back.
I have a question.
Okay, hold on.
Does your model then, if everything goes through as you've seen and kindergarten is completely eliminated, is there a model that takes in that factor, Whereas, you're introduced, a lot of these people aren't going to stand by and that, well, I'm not going to have my child go into some kind of kindergarten. So they go into a private entity. And then that has a retention rate. Well, that negatively affects your incoming first grade calculation, would not.
The survival ratio from kindergarten to first grade, I believe, is about is 1, which means if the number is 1, that means it's the same number of kids. If it's above 1, it means more kids are coming in. So yeah, we'd have to study that to see if kindergarten was dropped, what impact that would have on first grade.
Because I think we've already seen that effect even in a small amount just from going from full day to half day.
Yeah,
There's been
there was a drop going from full day to half day. You're exactly right.
Ms. Noacker?
Yes, Jenny Noacker. Jim, in your 22 years plus of experience, would you say that counties are not raising taxes here the last couple of years, if that's why we're in the government right now?
It's one of them, but
I totally agree with you with the fund balance. You can't run it down to zero. You just can't do it. You have to have a remaining fund. But in your best advice, that's why we're at it.
it's one of them. There's a lot of different factors.
Okay, any other comment? All right, thank you all for coming.
Meeting adjourned, 8:37.